Alright kids, in this lesson, in topic 10.6, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about converting customary units, okay? So what you'll want to do right now is you're going to want to pause your video and get out your math book and a piece of paper to do some example problems. So pause the video right now and get ready. Alright, here we go. Now, to start with, I want to give you a little bit of friendly advice here on some of the things that you should be aware of, okay? And some friendly advice on converting customary units would be that you're going to definitely want to use your measurement tables. That is really, really important, okay? The book will come with these measurement tables. You're going to need to use them, okay? The next thing that you want to remember is that when you convert from smaller units to larger units, you're going to use the operation of division. And that's pretty generally just, the basic rule. When you convert from a smaller unit to a larger unit, you're going to use the operation of division. Okay? And likewise, when you convert from a larger unit to a smaller unit, you're going to use multiplication. Alright? So a good example would be the problem that you give down below, and it has 72 inches equals how many feet? Well, in this case, you're going from a smaller unit to a larger unit, okay? So you're going from smaller to larger, and you're going to multiply. So in other words, you're going to divide. So in other words, what you have to do is simply take 72 and divide it by 12. And when you do that, you see that you get 6. And so 72 inches is equal to 6 feet. And if you wanted to check to make sure that that is accurate, you could simply multiply, and you would do 6 times 2 is 12, carry your 1. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 72. Alright? So remember, these general rules will really help you out in this unit. Okay? Some other things that I would like to point out to you is the following. Okay? And these are important steps you take to convert customary units, but mostly you will do them in your head. Okay, so when we think about converting customary units, what we're doing is we're finding an initial ratio of units. Okay, so the first thing you do is you determine your initial ratio of units. Then what you do is you set up a proportion, and then you scale to complete your proportion using either division or multiplication, depending on how you set up your proportion. So an example of this would be as if we use the 72 inches equals 6 feet. So we already know that 72 inches is going to equal 6 feet. We know that, okay? But, we could easily do it in our head, but what we want to do is think of it this way, okay? Our initial ratio would be a 12-to-1 ratio. In other words, we would have 12 inches for every 1 foot. Okay? And then we want to find out what 72 inches is to feet. So what we would then do is we would set up our proportion. 12 to 72. 1 to some unknown. Well, of course, what we have to do is we have to multiply 12 times 6 to get 72. So, of course, we would multiply 1 by 6 to get 6. And so we could use proportions to figure out and convert units. Alright? But all of this is basically going to be done in your head. And you're simply going to say, okay, I'm going to take 72, divide it by 12, and get 6. Because the rule is you divide. Alright? But this is really what's happening inside the whole process, okay? So anyways, let's take a look at our book and see what they have to share with us, okay? So, first of all, how can you change between units of customary measurement? Now, the first thing that I want to point out to you is here is the first table that you're going to get to help you, okay? We have an initial ratio of 1 to 12. 1 foot equals 12 inches. Another initial ratio of 1 yard to 3 feet. Another example of yards to inches, 1 yard to 36 inches. And then we go into miles, and 1 mile is equal to 5,280 feet, or 1 mile is equal to 1,760 yards. This table will come in very handy for you, okay? So keep that in mind as we are going over this lesson, okay? So let me get this cleaned up here a little bit. Alright, let's take a look at our situation that they've given us. How can you change between measurements? How can you change between units of customary measurement? Alright, so here we go. The sidewalk in front of a store is 54 feet long and 4 5/10 feet wide. What is the length of the sidewalk in yards? What is the width of the sidewalk in inches? So we've got two things going on here. Okay, one of the things they want us to do is they want us to identify what the length of the sidewalk is in yards. Well, the length given to us is 54 feet long, so we're looking at converting 54 feet to yards. The next question is, what is the width of the sidewalk in inches? Well, they give us the width in feet, so we're going to be converting feet to inches. Let's take a look at how they handle these examples. Okay? Now, our first example was to determine how long the sidewalk is in terms of yards. So we are going from smaller to larger units. All right? So to change from smaller units to larger units, we're going to use the operation of division. Okay? Now remember, we still have an initial ratio of 3 feet for every 1 yard. So this is kind of like that think in your head thing. Alright? Now, all we're really going to do is take 54 and divide it by 3 to get 18. So when we take the number of feet in 1 yard and we divide the total number of feet we have, we will get the number of yards that we have. So in this case, the sidewalk is 18 yards long. And you can see where 54 feet equals 18 yards. Okay? Now we come over here to this example, and they wanted us to find out how wide the sidewalk was in inches. And so in this case, we are actually going from a larger unit, okay, a larger unit to a smaller unit. So to change from a larger unit to a smaller unit, we are going to multiply. And again, you need an initial ratio, okay, of 12 to 1 because there's 12 inches in 1 foot, or 12 inches equals 1 foot. Okay, and you would then take your 4 5/10 feet and multiply by 12 to get 54. So 4 5/10 of a foot is equal to 54 inches, and the sidewalk is 54 inches wide. Okay, so this is kind of how you convert measurements in the customary system. They then give us some other examples. Now here's another table for you. This is customary units of weight. And it tells you that 1 pound is equal to 16 ounces, or a ratio of 1 to 16. Tons would be 1 ton is equal to 2,000 pounds. Okay? And so those are going to be very important to you. and they give us some example problems over here. And the first example problem that they give us is 56 ounces equals how many pounds? Okay, so they're going from ounces to pounds. Now, in this case, you can see where you've set up an initial ratio of units. And you can see where you have 1 pound to 16 ounces. And that's what we have over here. 1 pound equals 16 ounces. So we have to think to ourselves, okay, we're going to set up a proportion, and we want to go to 16 ounces. So we need to get from 16 ounces to 56 ounces. And we're going to do that through multiplication. Okay? But we really don't know what we're going to multiply by yet. So we're going to do some operation. Okay? And what we're going to do is we simply divide the number of ounces that we want. We have 56 ounces. We're going to divide it by 16 ounces, and we'll get 3.5. So now we know that we have to multiply both terms by 3.5 in order to get the number of pounds that we need. And so in this case, we would simply multiply 1 times 3.5, and we get our answer. So this was a pretty good, easy problem because you're just multiplying using the identity property. All right? So the answer to this would be 56 ounces, and 3 5/10 of a pound is equal to 3 5/10 of a pound. Okay? All right. Let's take another example, which is all about capacity. And this one is talking about capacity. And capacity is the volume of a container measured in liquid units. And over here are our conversions, or our initial ratios that we would want to use. And you can see where you have 1 gallon is equal to 4 quarts, 1 quart is equal to 2 pints, 1 pint is equal to 2 cups, and 1 cup is equal to 8 fluid ounces. And one of the things that you want to realize when you're doing problems that involve capacity, such as this one where you're going from gallons to pints, you might look over at your table and say, okay, well, 1 gallon is equal to how many pints? And all of a sudden you realize, whoa, 1 gallon is equal to 4 quarts, but pints are way up here, and I don't know how to get that. So what you're going to have to do is first, you're going to have to establish how many pints, okay? You're going to have to establish how many pints are in 1 gallon. And that's what you need to be very careful about. So in this case, we can see that 1 gallon is equal to 4 quarts. 1 gallon is equal to 4 quarts. And 4 quarts times 2, because 1 quart is equal to 2 pints, will give us 8 pints. So what we've done is we've worked our way down from gallons to quarts to pints, and then we have an initial value. And we can say to ourselves, okay, 1 gallon is equal to 8 pints. And so now when we create our proportion, we can say, okay, 1 times 2 is 2, and we can multiply 8 times 2, and we will get 16. So in other words, 8 pints times 2 equals 16 pints. So 2 gallons is actually equal to 16 pints. So it would be a 2 to 16 ratio. Alright? And so you've got to be careful. Just make sure that you set up an initial ratio of units. In some situations, you might need to convert units, such as up above, like we had up here. Then you set up your proportion, like they did right here. And then you scale to complete the proportion, like we did right here. Okay? Alright, now that we have a general idea of how we would convert units in the customary system, look in your book and see if you can complete 17, 18, 21, and 22 on your own. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can solve these problems. Alright, let's take a look at what we have here. Okay? Alright, number 17. The correct answer for number 17 is 8. 96 inches is equal to 8 feet. If you look at this using the simple rules, you're going from a smaller unit to a larger unit, so you're dividing. So you would simply take 96, divide it by 12, and get 8. Now, if you were looking at this using a more, using ratios and proportions, you'd see that you'd have an initial ratio of 12 to 1, 12 inches to 1 foot. You want to go from 12 to 96, so you can figure out how many feet you would have. And so you would simply say to yourself, okay, well, 12 times 8 equals 96, so 1 times 8 equals 96. All right? And so that's how you would solve that problem if you were using proportions. All right? Let's take a look at number 18. 2 quarts equals how many fluid ounces? Now this one gets a little bit complicated, okay? It equals 64 fluid ounces. Now, in the simplest form, you're going from the quarts to fluid ounces, so you're going to multiply. But the question is, if you have 2 quarts, how do you know you should multiply by 32? Well, in this situation, if you set it up using proportions, what you see is you actually have 1 quart equals 32 fluid ounces. But how do you know, and where do you get this 32 fluid ounces? Well, 1 quart equals 2 pints. All right? So that's simple enough. But then pints, you would have 1 pint equals 2 cups, because you got to go from pints to cups. So you have 2 pints, and each pint equals 2 cups. So you're going to do 2 times 2, and you will get 4. So now we have 4 cups there. All right? But we still have to take cups and convert it to fluid ounces. Well, now we have to ask ourselves, 1 cup equals 8 fluid ounces. We have 4 cups, so we're going to multiply 4 times 8, and we're going to get 32. So now we know that we have 32 fluid ounces for every 1 quart. Okay? And in this case, when we set it up, we can say, okay, well, I have 1 quart equals 32 ounces. I want to go to 2 quarts, so I simply have to multiply by 2. And if I multiply the top by 2, I multiply the bottom by 2, and I get 64. All right? And that is, that's a lot of work there. But really the most important part of this is remembering that if you want to do the multiplication, you have to understand how to get your ratio set up. You have to be able to get this right here set up. And you have to be able to take quarts and convert them down to fluid ounces. Okay? And you do it through this process. Alright, let's talk about the next problem. Okay? I'll get this out of the way. Alright, number 21. 1 5/10 miles equals how many feet? Well, it would equal 7,920 feet. And we would figure that out in the simplest method by multiplying 1.5 times 5,280, because we are going from miles to feet, so we are going to multiply, and because we're going from larger to smaller, and we would multiply by the number of feet in 1 mile. If we were to look at this using ratios and proportions, this is what it would look like. You can see that we have 1 mile, okay, a 5,280 to 1 ratio. And what we want to do is we want to go from 1 mile to 1 5/10 of a mile. So, of course, the identity property means that we will multiply by 1 5/10, and we will get our answer. And then if we multiply this term by 1 5/10, we simply multiply our top term by 1 5/10, and we get 7,920. So essentially, you just want to multiply by the number of feet in 1 mile. And there it is as a set of ratios. All right, next one. Okay, let's take a look at number 22. 2,640 yards equals how many miles? Well, in this case, it equals 1 5/10 miles. If you were solving this using the rules of larger to smaller, you'd see that you would take 2,640 and divide it by the number of yards in 1 mile, which is 1,760, and you'd get 1 5/10 miles. Okay? Now, if you were to solve this using proportions and initial ratios, this is what it would look like. Okay, you'd set up your initial ratio of yards to miles, and you'd say to yourself, okay, I want to go from this many yards, we want to go from this number to this number, and I want to go from this number to some unknown number. And what you need to do is ask yourself, well, what do I have to multiply by? Well, in order to figure out what your factor would be to multiply across to create equivalent amounts, you'd have to do the division. You'd have to divide 2,640 by 1,760, and that would give you the factor that you would multiply both terms by. So if you multiply both terms, you would end up with your answer of 1 5/10. Okay? And so that's how you would solve, this is how these problems would look if you were solving them with proportions. So if you can figure out the initial ratio for the units, you can pretty much just either multiply or divide. Alright, let's take a look at number 25, 26, and 27. See if you can solve those ones on your own. Pause the video. Alright, our first one is, when we look at it, our first one is how many 1-cup servings are in 1 gallon? Well, in this case, the answer is going to be 16 cups in 1 gallon. And you would solve it pretty much like this, because you're simply going to go from gallon to quarts, quarts to pints, pints to cups, because you're essentially creating an initial ratio. And so you know that, you just have to multiply it out using your tables. Alright, number 26, how many inches are in 6.5 feet? Well, in 6.5 feet there are 78 inches. We know that because we have 6.5 feet, and we're going to take 6 of those feet. We would take 6 feet, and we would multiply 6 times 12, and that would give us how many inches are in 6 feet, but then our half of a foot is equal to 6 inches as well. So we would take 6 times 12, which would be 72, add 6 to it, which would be 78. And that's how we get our 78. So you're almost doing two simple problems there. Okay, number 27, how many ounces are in 2 pounds 8 ounces? Well, this problem is a lot like number 26. Basically what you do is you're going to take your 2 pounds and convert it to ounces by multiplying 2 times 16. Then you're going to take your 8 ounces and add it to that amount that you got here. And so 2 times 16 is 32, so that's 32 ounces, plus another 8 ounces, which of course would equal 40 total ounces. Alright? Alright, so we're going to stop right there. If you have any further questions, you can see your teacher or you can watch the Pearson Realize video.